Welcome to episode 7 of the Hirewell Recruiting Insights podcast, also LinkedIn Live. I'm your host, James Hornick, partner at Hirewell. I've got a very special guest with me today, Dan Cummings, who is the VP of Platform Solutions and Strategy at Arrive. Dan, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I'd like for you to talk a bit about yourself, and now you're in sales nowadays, which still blows my mind. Hopefully you have a decent elevator pitch down. The reason for it today, there was really 3 reasons why I wanted to have you on today. So this is the first live I've done with an actual guest. I did a couple test ones in the last couple weeks. But one, you have a really interesting career from not just a progression standpoint, but from a what I call proactive management standpoint. I think a lot of people in their careers, we can talk about this a little bit, some people are very maybe overly conservative and afraid to make moves when they should, and some people are too jumpy and maybe freak out and go maybe before it's really the right time. And knowing you as long as I have, and I guess I should say kind of candidly here, Dan was one of the first 5 to 10 people I ever placed in my career 15 years ago. And we've actually became great friends since then. I can't say that, I'd like to say everyone's my friend, but you and I actually are friends. So I've got more insights into his career and the moves that he made over that time frame than a lot of other people I would know. So I can say honestly, you've done an interesting job in terms of how you practically manage your career, but secondly, you've also built a lot of teams. Yeah. So there's at least 3 times that I can recall where you came into an organization from scratch where they had not the organization from scratch per se, but some of those was the case. Some were the case where they had a brand new initiative where they had nobody for yet, and you built the teams kind of from the ground up. So, and also kind of the progression from the very start. What was your role? I guess going way back.
Technical manager. I cold called you because I was trying to get into the Chicago market. I wanted to move to Chicago.
Yeah,
that was so wild. So maybe I am in sales, right? Because I was selling back then.
Yeah, it was. So just to put some perspective, you worked for AOL at the time, which is, you look back now, it's kind of funny.
Right.
There was a point in time where AOL was the top tier tech firm.
It'd be like Google today.
Yeah. So it doesn't, even though it's kind of laughable now, at the time it was a big deal. But you wanted to move to Chicago, and I remember too. It was I was so bad back in those days, and
I don't know.
I was just getting going. I remember the call too. I was fumbling through, trying to figure out what questions to ask and whatnot. But ended up working out. I got you here to Chicago. So, but you wanted to maybe walk us through your career briefly. Actually, why don't you start currently? So tell us just a little bit about Arrive and what you do there and what Arrive does.
Sure.
And then let's kind of walk through, kind of broad strokes in terms of how you got to this point.
Right. So Arrive is the leading mobility platform around our main premise is around parking. So think about mobility, people going, to and from places, delivery vehicles going to places, Uber drivers, micromobility, they're all going to need storage. And so that's what we are. We are a platform to basically facilitate either consumers or businesses or fleets to find parking and pay for parking without having to know which way to this system works at this garage or on the street or in a surface lot. So that's what we do. Okay.
So you were a technical project manager at AOL when I first met you, and then you became a BA, a business analyst.
Yep, that's right.
And then because I remember early in those days, you had a mission. You wanted to be on the product track.
Yeah.
So you wanted to get into product management, and you had a plan. And I have to tell you guys that product management's a huge field now. It's one of the most common positions we see, but back in the mid 2000s, that wasn't the case. It had a different meaning. There were different. It was around, but it just wasn't adopted. It wasn't the model that software companies that everyone uses nowadays. So you were very much kind of a pioneer in terms of realizing this is where things are going, and that you want to get on that track. And I still remember you telling me about you want to do this. I'm like, that's cool. I don't place these people because no one asked me to hire them. You know what I mean? So I didn't know it was a thing yet, but it worked out. But then you ran product at several organizations. Yep. So if you want to kind of fast forward a bit, I even had to look at your background here because I forgot some of the places you had worked at.
Yeah.
But
it's been fun. I'd say the thing I knew I wanted to do product. There's a guy named Marty Kagan that's got a Silicon Valley Product Group. He's wrote a book. I worked with him when he was at Netscape. I remember being on a call with him, and I was like, well, who is this guy? What is his job? I want that job.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what started me off. But the reason why I've done my career progression the way I have, and I have been proactive, thank you for saying that. In high school, I worked at a grocery store, and the way they trained the managers had to do every job in the store before they became an official manager.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I've done almost every job in a tech organization now.
Okay.
And so that helps me empathize and kind of negotiate, okay, I need to get this done. What's the team I need to build? And then what do they need to do that's better than what I can do?
Yeah. So I think, and that was the thing too, that I can't say this enough as a recruiter, and I think anyone watching this can relate. When you have a friend who is making a decision that you can tell is not a good one, it's easier for you to tell that than them, because as human beings, we're always inherently emotionally invested into decisions we make. And sometimes it's easier for everyone around you to see when you're making a bad decision or a good decision. And I can't say this enough, like job changes are one of the most high stress things you can do in life. It's there's certain life events, marriage and kids and other things like that. But next to all that stuff, or buying a home is probably up on that tier. But then job changes, it's the one that's for most people is going to happen the most often. And I see two traps that people fall into. I've had probably 1,000 conversations with people who probably should leave their job, but they're just too afraid to because of that added stress and that fear of the unknown. And I've talked to probably 1,000 people who, as a recruiter, of course, we're always like, I hope you get a job, but like, you should stay. What I mean? Like, you're in a great spot. You're freaking out over something that should be solvable. And so when people say, and I'll make fun of you a little bit, this could easily turn into a roast, by the way. Dan's had both long and short stints, you know what I mean? And I think in technology, that's totally normal and expected. And people, especially in recruitment and hiring, anybody from that generation that you stay at the same company for 30 years, like, what do you mean you change jobs a year later, 2 years later, and whatnot? And I think in technology, it's a different game from the standpoint that usually when you're brought in, and this was the case for you on a couple occasions, you're brought in for some brand new projects or brand new initiative. And once that's completed, it's not the same job anymore. It's not the same company, or at least it's not the opportunity it was initially. And sometimes there's more there backing it up, but sometimes that's it. It's built. There's no point in...
Yeah, if I could give myself advice back then, or maybe not advice, but just kind of like, plant something into my brain back then, would have been like, what is your purpose on this earth? Because I didn't realize what I was doing it proactively, but I didn't understand the core meaning of why I was doing these moves until later. And what my purpose in life is to build. Yeah. So if I'm at a job and I'm not building anymore, I'm gonna leave, right? Because I can't just maintain something. I have to continue to build. So if that, in a lot of those jobs, I finished what I was building, and they're like, "Great, maintain it." I'm like, "It was very nice working with you."
Okay. That I was gonna say, I remind, but your current job, you've been at for 5 years now. So with Arrive,
this is a very difficult problem and very challenging problem. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
And he told me before we started this cast that ever since I promoted it 2 days ago, you've been getting lots of recruiters contacting.
I'm very happy in my job. I'm happy to connect with you. I'd love to connect with you, but I'm very happy in my job.
Happy to network. He's not going anywhere. But then you've led product in at least 3 different organizations that I recall, and now you're in sales. Which is like the last thing you probably ever thought you'd get into.
I resisted it. So we were. I went to CES, Consumer Electronics Show, I guess 2017 with my CEO, and we were basically doing business development, trying to find partners for our platform. And at the end of the day, he looked at me and he's like, "I'm exhausted." I'm like, "I'm energized. Let's keep going." And he's like, "You should do business development." I'm like, And then he's like, "Well, no, you can still keep product, but like we'll do business development too." And I'm like, "Okay,
sure, take on more work." And we're totally not going to change this up. And
right. And so he promptly just moved me out of product.
He didn't realize what was happening.
And I was like, and then all of a sudden I was like, realized that this is fun. This is a lot of fun, and it's still building, right? So I'm not building products anymore, but I'm building relationships and I'm building a platform. So it's a different kind of building. But it's still building.
I think that, and honestly, it's kind of a normal. And there's a lot of industries where that happens. There's certain companies where you want to hire your junior salespeople to kind of do something, but the people with senior level domain knowledge are doing sales and BD, but it's just different. They're coming at it from a different angle of, it's not the classic sales upbringing, but it's more of a standpoint of they just know more than everyone else does. It's the background of having a lot of experience in one specific area, and especially, so you ran product for 4 years, 3 years, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
So, you literally know it better than anyone else, especially when it relates to your company.
I'm a cheap date. So they can send 3 people or they can send me, and they send me. And it's fun. I look at what I'm doing is this a fit where it's going to be a good product experience within the partner's experience? And so I put my product hat on and I'm listening, and I'm trying to understand what is the challenge for their customers, where would it make sense? Is this going to create value for us and for the partner and for the customer, right? Like, everybody should be winning in this scenario.
I was going to ask you, and I think you already kind of answered this, but the key thing I wanted you to get across was when you know it's time to move on. And you mentioned you're a builder.
Yeah, so I'd say if I'm done building, or I'm not learning anything, I'm not like growing. It's there's not something new that's like the next cutting edge. So like in a way, moving from product to business development, it was time. Like I'd been doing product for a very long time, and so I was catching myself being like, just do what I'm telling you to do versus like learning and being curious. And so I was like, I think I need a shift to something new.
Okay.
So I think that's it. It's like if you're not learning and you're not like fulfilling a purpose, it's probably time to move on. That doesn't mean whatever that company is doing is bad. It's just you're not a fit anymore, at least for your motivations.
Yeah. Any mulligans you'd like to take? Any career mistakes?
Yeah, I mean there was one. I'm not going to name names, but I moved from Chicago back to Virginia.
I remember this.
Yeah.
I almost forgot the time.
That was a reactionary.
Yeah.
That was a very reactionary move.
Yeah.
We had just had a kid, and it was right before the meltdown. And my company had just gotten bought. Not my company, but the company I was working at got bought. And I'm going to say my company a lot.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I own the company.
You'll say my company in relation to like 5 different companies.
Yeah. So we just got bought, and I wasn't really on board with where it was going. In retrospect, that's actually I probably should have stayed there, because what I've learned is the more you stick it out in those situations, I still had more to build. So I still more to build, and I should have sticked it out, because when you stick it out, that's when you grow the most, right? That's when you're like up against whatever it is you're up against.
Yeah.
So that would be my mulligan. Like that was a bad move, and so I walked into that new job. With all the wrong motivations. It wasn't a fit, and I promptly moved back to Chicago 6 months later.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was actually happy that happened, because
I had a lot of people telling me not to leave, and I should have listened to you.
When we were younger, we were a lot of fun to hang out with. Those days are gone. All right, so let's pivot here for a minute. So building teams, and this is something I kind of want you to lead the discussion a little more, because this is you've done this at GP Shopper, at Guaranteed Rate, at Arrive. And I guess so GP Shopper was they're now part of, was it Synchrony?
Yeah.
Okay. So they were a very much kind of an upstart mobile dev shop that didn't have an office in Chicago, and Dan was instrumental. Were you the first person here building that?
Yeah. So Maya and Alex met me at some retail conference, and we kept like talking about a job, and I kept so like this was like the third time we'd like interviewed with each other.
Yeah.
And it was the third time that I'm not moving to New York City, and so like I said that, and I thought for sure at the last one they're going to be like, you're dead to me.
Yeah.
And so I said, listen, I'm not moving to New York, but would you be open to a Chicago office? And he was like, well, build a model. So I built a model. And then I sent it over to him, and then like a typical business model, like this is what people cost, this is what office space costs.
Yeah.
This is what I think the team needs to be. And he was like, this is only 20% less than Manhattan. I'm like, no, man, this is the Monte Carlo scenario. Like I found the most expensive office space. That's the highest end for Android. We're a mobile app development shop, so this is the highest end for a full stack developer. This is the highest end for an Android developer. So and he was like, oh my God. And then I got a co-working space with one desk next to like a heating duct return for like $75 a month.
Yeah.
And then I just grew it up to a point where we could not fit in this little room inside the co-working space. And then
I didn't even think I think you didn't even invite me over to that space. I don't think I ever saw it.
Yeah, that was just like, that was my office, but I never met it. I was like, let's have coffee downstairs. Like never where I was.
Yeah. How did you? Well, so in terms of like building the team, how do you decide? Who you actually needed to get going, from the start?
It depends. Well, with GP Shopper, it was more about we had a team in New York, and we wanted to build out peers for them in Chicago. So for me, it was more about I needed a technical lead in Chicago. I needed that was going to report into the CTO in New York. I needed a CTO in New York to like buy in and want to do this and see the value in it. So I always kind of either start with either the lead, like identify a lead that's already in the company and be like, this is my counterpart, or I need to find one. I need to find someone really quickly, because I can interview a developer to a certain point, but then there's specific skill sets for each stack of the company that needs to be vetted, right? So, and that's not my skill set, right? I still code. I'm not a good developer.
Yeah.
I'm a brute force developer. So I always try to find that tech lead first. And in GP Shopper, that's what we did. I also was lucky enough to have a guy named Danny Mueller move to Chicago, and then he just blew it up. Like he was instrumental in our success. So that was a lot of fun to have that happen. So and then in Guaranteed Rate, that was the kind of an opposite problem. It was basically a bunch of different development teams, kind of all with different stacks, and I was being brought in to kind of like...
This was, and context, this was at the very beginning of their online product, right?
Yeah, so they had an online product, and they had a team that was kind of like a team for hire that ended up being behind a company called Cardivi that got bought by DocuSign, and they're like an amazing team. So they built out like not a minimal viable product, like a first version of the product. But then there was like another team that did like the .com, and Guaranteed Rate's a correspondent mortgage lender, right? So basically what they do is, anyway, you get a mortgage and then it's great.
But it's one of those old school industries, or at least it used to be, where everything was very...
industry, and they were very resistant to online in the sense that they didn't want their jobs to be, or their commission rates to be threatened. They wanted to make sure that if a lead came in, it was absolutely assigned to them, so it had to be bulletproof on like, this user is assigned to this loan officer, right? Like, and I'm messing with their income, so I'm very much appreciating like, I don't want to mess with somebody's wallet.
And they built a totally awesome online product.
Yeah, it was fun.
So
the first step I did there was actually go through loan officer training. So like, I didn't take the test, but I think I would have passed. But that was like the first step, is just like understand like the user. And so the user, for people like applying for a mortgage, and like I always put a Post-it note up on my monitor when I started a company, like to remind myself like, this is why I joined. So Guaranteed Rate was no mortgagees and kill the fax machine. Like, I didn't want anyone to have to fax anything anymore. And there's just so much mortgagees, like so much stuff that nobody understands in mortgages, that I was like, we're going to do this in plain English. It was a lot of work. But there, it was about removing a bunch of people that were good intentions, but like not really, they were like contractors and stuff that it wasn't a fit. Like, we needed to create a team from the ground up, replace the awesome team that went on to do the Cardivi DocuSign stuff with a team that could take over that code and then extend it. So again, that one required me to start from like nothing. So the very first person I hired was like, I need to have my my director of development. And this person needs to be full stack. This person needs to be able to like understand all the aspects from the database all the way all the way through. And so that helped me build out the rest of the team. And then the second roles I typically go for is I need a really good designer and user experience person. I'm always hiring against my deficits, right? So like, I know what good UX is. But don't give me Photoshop, or like, don't give me anything like...
It's funny you mentioned UX, because that's the other thing where I mentioned when I started in this business back in like 2004, product was not really a thing people hired for, right? And UX was definitely like, that didn't even, no one hired for that until like the iPhone came out, and what was that? 08,
well, there was like an engineering manager, a designer, and then like a business VP, and like that was the team, and they were all infighting with each other. It was crazy back then.
It's just so it's just like the transition, because I guess the booking to that thought is that those are the two of the most sought after positions we see. It's just kind of the changing landscape. Okay, cool. Fast forwarding the what you did, I guess currently before you moved into BD.
So Arrive was actually different than the other two in the sense that Arrive there was a great team there, but there wasn't a product team. So it was very much not about hiring developers. That I had an awesome CTO, awesome dude, had built a really good tech stack. It was more about like, we need a product team, we need to create a product process. So it was much more about again, it was I think my first hire was a creative director. The second hire was my user experience person, and then it was product people underneath that. And so in that realm, I always think about ratios, like how many products can a product person handle at once? Like in my time on Earth, it seems to be about 3 where they're excellent at it. And so, and then what level do you need to hire? Do you need to hire senior? Can you hire someone that, do you hire on potential? Do you hire on experience? Depending on the need, you might need somebody that's just like, I don't need to think about this. I need to be able to walk away. And then there's other times where it's like, I need to save on, budget. So I need to hire someone with potential and then train them up. Are they coachable? Are they hungry? Have they done their homework? Are they like students, right? Do they care about their craft?
Executionally, getting into the recruiting portion, what's your? Here's the thing. So I want to get your take on things, because you've both worked with internal and external recruiters and whatnot. But no matter what, when you've always been in the tech space is hard to hire for. So it's great to have these plans. But so many companies struggle with, okay, we know what we need. We have a plan to figure it out. I know the type of person we need, but everybody needs the same people. So what's worked for you as a hiring manager and someone's built these teams out? What do you think is key?
Well, I think what I see a lot of the times is that it's kind of like chuck it over the wall requirements. So like, you just like, here's the job posting, and then I'm going to like farm this out to 5 firms in my internal recruiter, and then like post this on whatever, right? And that can work. I think it's a much longer process than it needs to be, and you're actually not getting. I don't see the same quality, right? So like, I look at it more like I'm building a team of people that are going to help me find the right my team, so a team of recruiting people. And so what I'm doing is basically telling folks I trust, recruiters I trust, like, here's my overall plan. This is what I think I'm going to end up hiring. This is sort of what my budget is. I need to get your input as far as what you think the market's going to bear and how hard or easy this is going to be, so I can, again, build a business model against this. And then the other thing I do is I go to freaking community stuff. So like, if I need an iOS developer and I don't have an internal recruiter, and I don't have an iOS developer to like, or a tech lead to work with, I show up at the iOS developer meetup group, and I'm like, hi, my name's Dan. I'm not an iOS developer. I hope you don't mind me being here. I'm the hiring manager. I'm looking for people. And this is what we're doing. And like, that has been also, I'm giving away trade secrets here, but whatever. It works. I mean, and you're also getting people that get excited about it, right? Like, you're taking the time to go out in the community. It's important. Yeah.
I think that the other thing too, and I've known you've done this, and you might not realize that not everybody does this.
Right.
So it's another kind of key thing you do. One thing I've always preached is, as a recruiter, I'm the first one to say, like, you should get as many employee referrals as you can. You should try to do as much on yourself as you can, up to the point that either you have internal or external recruitment. But no matter what, your recruiting team is you. It's the other people on your team, and then it's whether the recruiting resource. It's all of that. And you've always been great at making sure everybody on all aspects of those front lines has the same message that you do. You know, when I've worked with him. And you've used us, you've done stuff internally. We always had a very clearly delineated plan of like what the opportunity is here, because I think candidate experience is so big nowadays, and I think that you've always taken an approach where whoever could potentially, whether it's your employees or your people on your teams or whatnot, whoever could possibly talk with people, they always had the ammo to actually know what the story is, articulate it, what the next steps could be to get them introduced to you or whoever else.
It's about the culture, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're conveying the culture in the job posting, you're conveying the culture to the people that are, talking to potential candidates, and that the candidates understand not just what the job is or what the product is, but also like what it's going to be like to work there. And like, making sure that it's a fit for them. And like, the worst thing as a manager is when you hire someone and they're not a cultural fit, and they know it and you know it, and then you're like in this position where you're like, this sucks. And it's happened, but if you put the work in up front, it's way less likely.
How much has that improved? How often has that happened to you in the last year or two last few years versus 10 years ago? Like, is it something you've gotten better at and realized? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I'm much more. I used to not be a big proponent of like hiring processes. Now I see the benefit in them. Like, I'd be like, come on, we'll just do it, right? Like, I've always been that way in my life. Just try it. But I understand what process is now. I understand how to interview. Like behavioral interview, like understand like their background and ferret out like wins and losses. But we still make mistakes. Like, I would say it's less often. I hope. Yeah. But it's I guess it's way less often. But we still make mistakes. Yeah. Everybody does.
I was hearing you talk about interview processes and like with a grab, like, who is this guy? Like 15 years ago, this is not the same guy.
No, I'd be like, just bring him in. We'll figure it out.
So the funny story I was gonna say, he and I met up. Was that 2 weeks ago, something like that? And you said you had to make a few apologies. Now that you're in sales, you owe a few people apologies.
Yeah, I did. I've been calling people because when you're head of product and the salesperson comes in with like, hey, I've got this client and this idea, and I'm like, no, like, get out of here. Yeah, like, you're messing up my sprint. I have this beautiful roadmap, and like, and like everything's clicking. Get out of my office. No, right? And so. Yeah, I definitely had to call some people back and be like, now I understand your situation. Like, I was a bit of a jerk. I'm sorry. And then everybody's been, it's been great.
Well, everyone else is listening now, so if anybody
I apologize. It's again, I think that's, what's the law of requisite variety, right? He or she who has the most tools wins. And so, I didn't have that tool set then. Yeah. And now I do. So I definitely been making amends.
You're all grown up. So, I think that, is there anything else you want to talk about? I think we kind of covered a lot, and then, I don't know if there's any other key points you wanted to get across or stuff you thought was...
as far as building teams, I can't stress how important it is to be a part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's nothing that's better than that. Like, because you trusting that a 180 word blurb about what you're doing and like a 180 word blurb about your culture is going to find the person that's going to take your company like, way further than you could, isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that would be it. Like just, and yeah, I'm happy to connect with you, but I am very happy in my job.
Well, thanks for coming in. I have to read the outro text here, so ready for this.
Yeah.
I love reading scripted stuff. Thanks for listening to the Hirewell's Recruiting Insights podcast. If you like what you heard and want more insights from our recruiting experts, visit hirewell.com/recruiting-insights. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for stopping in, guys. See you next week.